Practice Probiotics, Thrive Together interview series. I'm joined with Karl Smith Brendan McDowell. This is part 2. Feel free to check back for part 1, where we have some fascinating conversations surrounding various fascinating topics which we're going to explore in a little bit more detail now. So what I'd like to start is, exactly a week ago today, when we did the interview with Dina Smiles and Matt Wynn, it was just before Dina would very kindly offer to cook for the community. Yeah, so we had like a Thrive Festival finale feast of sorts, and Dina's really passionate about kind of like trying to avoid waste and trying to use what's local, and just trying to kind of like do things in the most sustainable way possible. Dina, and we put word out, has anybody got any glut that they might be able to contribute to the feast? And you very kindly invited us to your allotment just down the road, and you hooked us up with a prize marrow. Yeah, and some kale yeah. And some spinach.
Yeah, and I think like a round courgette.
Yeah, man. So that was a real joy to visit, man. You've got a really, really nice allotment thing going down there. It seems like you're utilising it in a very effective and efficient manner. And it's something that you've been passionate about for a while. So would you be willing to tell us a little bit about how you feel about allotments and why it is that you feel motivated to do what you do?
Yeah, so I guess like Dee, I'm quite passionate about food as well, and this idea of people growing their own food, and one of the best places to do that is an allotment. If you don't have access in your own garden, or if you don't have a garden. So yeah, I sort of started allotmenting in 2012 at this site just down the road. Sharing with a couple of brothers, but then about 3 years ago I got my own site with a friend, and yeah, just been sort of learning about sort of organic gardening, something called no-dig gardening, which is a regenerative process, which is all about getting the soil microbiome healthy and probably affecting then your own gut microbiome, which you probably talked a lot with Dina about. So yeah, I think it's really important to have that opportunity to have a relationship with your food, know where it comes from, and like you say, reduce your kind of need for stuff flown over from Peru or Chile or wherever else it's coming from. And yeah, so I have this really cool allotment. It's like 100-year-old apple tree on there. So it got a bit of connection with the past. The actual allotments are about 100 years old. And it's also like a really good place to connect with community, because as anybody who's got an allotment will know, you'll plant some courgettes, and then you'll have too many courgettes. So you don't need to, but it's good to share that out with people, and that kind of helps you become part of the community, have conversations you might not normally have. I think we were talking about this earlier, like sometimes it's a bit strange just to randomly talk to people. It's nice to have something to sort of concoct with, here's this marrow, talk about things and kind of get to know people. And like you had here, you had like a communal meal, and I felt really happy about that food going to that, because I did actually have a glut and I wasn't eating it all. So I think it can help you integrate with your community, just like community gardens. They're a really good place for people to meet each other and kind of learn from each other as well. So.
Respect, man. Last week when I was talking, I was chatting to Matt, who grows a lot of his own food, and Dina as well, who's been growing for a long time as well. We was talking about this idea of like the joys and the relevance of kind of engaging children with growing. Dina, we spoke about it earlier outside. She was saying that she spoke to a child who didn't know that apples came from trees, and there's this kind of disconnection again that we keep coming back to. Do you know what I mean? So you're both fathers, you're both parents. Yeah, you've both got young sons, right? Yeah. I'm just really interested in how that might have kind of affected your perspective or your general sort of like thoughts about all of these things that we're talking about generally, but the relevance and the role of some of these processes and like projects, and understandings that we're talking about in relation to the younger generation. So as parents yourselves, how do you feel about the relevance of these things when it comes to either your own children or kind of when you think about the schooling system and that sort of thing? I mean, what's the deal?
Well, obviously, if you take any young child out and you take them into the wilderness, you see a completely different side of them than what you'd get from your normal academic, educational background. They learn a lot more about the natural world, and then they can bring that to learn more about themselves.
Right.
And when you're walking through these environments, you're lighting up all your senses. You've got your smells, you're looking at different things, you've got your balance, all manner of different things going through you. And for children growing up, this is a good way for them to learn and to gain knowledge about the natural environment.
Yeah.
I also think it's really important that as we teaching our children that they've got a respect for the natural world and help sort of protect it, to stop people building so much on it in the future, and to understand that that has a direct link with our health.
Yeah.
And also say, that our food and our medicines come from this natural world.
Yeah.
If we're not going to be teaching our children to look after it and to appreciate it properly, future generations are not going to have the interest of protecting it and sort of preserving it for future generations past them. So
respect, definitely. I mean, for myself, I was thinking about this quite a bit. Like the world is basically in an extinction level event. Like humans are an extinction level event, and we're losing species daily. We're losing the natural world, and I was born in Africa, in Kenya, and I think in captivity I saw a white rhino, and they actually went completely extinct recently. So that's like one animal my child's never going to see, or never going to know about, but in the same way as I learned about the dodo. So, and if we're not careful, my great-great-grandson wouldn't know what like a sparrow is or something like that. It's a possibility that we could lose our connection with the natural world to such an extent that we lose it. So all of these things I think are really important, and that's why I'm sort of like a forest school leader. Why it's really important to me.
So could you tell us a little bit more about that then?
Yeah, so
for anybody who doesn't know what a forest school is,
so forest school,
the relevance of forest schooling.
Yeah, so forest school is kind of a way of teaching children that's inspired by Steiner and his work, and it's the kind of schooling that you kind of get naturally in the sort of in Northern Europe, sort of Norway, etc. They kind of don't force feed children information in a room, and they don't really school them in that kind of way until after 7 years of age. So it's this idea of taking a journey with a child rather than trying to teach them specific things, and the natural world is perfect for that. You can you can do a task like climbing a tree and you learn about how to use your body, your gross motor skills. But then you might look at the tree and wonder what it is. You might maybe learn about gravity and how you don't want to let go while you're up the tree. Learn about the creatures that live on the tree, the interconnectedness of all of that, and kind of your place in that interconnected world. Like we are animals, we are part of nature, we're an incredibly important part of nature, and we have a massive impact due to industrialisation. We've reduced the forests of the world to the extent where we don't have enough CO2 scrubbers, and we're affecting the atmosphere. It's heating up. All these things are kind of interconnected. So if we can, like you say, teach children that respect and awe and that interest in nature, they can go on to kind of affect the world in a positive way in relation to that. So yeah, I think it's all really important stuff.
Certainly, I mean, very quickly from my point of view as well, you know, it's everything that you just touched upon is like crucially important and urgent as well. It's about much more as well than just developing an appreciation and like a care and a value for the natural world. As a result of these processes, the child actually develops and flourishes in a much more holistic manner.
Yeah.
So in terms of their ability to think, their ability to feel, to understand their body, to understand, like you said, like their role within the ecosystem and things like this. But it's not, because we have a bit of a conception of schooling and education in our society, that it's about knowledge acquisition, this idea that I acquire knowledge, there's facts, there's things to learn that I just try and memorize, and then I can regurgitate them and then get a B, C, D, etc., and get a CV, and then get a job. I can sell my labour on the market, and then I can compete for my exploitation and things like this. Do you know what I'm saying? But this is about this idea of like what I'm interested in this question anyway, about like what should be the purpose of schooling? What should be the purpose of education? Is it so that we can help children be moulded and adapt to the world that we send them into, which is structured in a very particular way, you know what I mean, as workers and as consumers and that kind of thing? Or is it about actually trying to understand what it means for a human being to develop like fully, you know, spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally, etc. Do you know what I mean? Socially, you know, in these ways, and I feel that that's something great also which comes out of these slightly more alternative approaches towards education. So that's
the normal schooling system seems a lot of time quite scared about sort of like spirituality in school, because they associate it with the religious studies, and not to separate that from sort of a personal development point of view.
Yeah.
Because spirituality is more than religion. It's but you know, from outsiders' point of view looking in, they often get that. So schools are sort of scared to do too much with bringing their spiritual development. So maybe for parents and other people to sort of have a bit of an influence within that side, and as going to things like the forestry school with Brendan, that's a spiritual experience, you know, and it's going to be brought through into their adult lives, and then they can pass that knowledge, what they've learnt on, the way of thinking, pass it on, and you know, it's be a good thing. And
yeah, definitely. I mean, like you were saying, I think things like forest school and those kind of concepts, they're about giving the child the opportunity to develop their own kind of relationship with the world, and figure out themselves what they might want to do, and you know, give them the ability to critically think about things, to form their own opinions, to influence other people's opinions, and maybe take on new stuff, and that's a kind of a really important thing. And I think schools aren't really, they're kind of more set up to make a child who, you know, becomes an adult who is a product themselves, that can fit into a society that needs someone to be able to cross the T's and dot the I's. Whereas different types of schooling might allow the person to, you know, rewrite the whole rule book, which is kind of what we need at the moment.
Word up. I mean, I'm really interested in like any kind of like schooling which gives responsibility to the child and respects them exploring their own volition, like having an interest in something and wanting to go and be inquisitive and explore that and see what they can learn from that. With that comes this idea of like a thirst and a passion for learning.
Yeah.
So rather than knocking it out of people, children, by putting them in highly hierarchical kind of like conditions where they've got to try and learn by rote various different, slightly at times irrelevant kind of like rules and procedures and policies which don't actually fulfill their needs or make them feel good. This idea of like, you know, you are free actually to explore what it means to be a human being in your surroundings. So trying to dissolve some of these hierarchies between the adult and the child, so that you've got much more cooperative relationships that are being created, where the child will make a decision, and as a result of that decision, learn from the consequences of making that decision, right? Rather than being forced to take actions that it hasn't chosen itself. Because as a result of that approach towards schooling, from my point of view, you end up just perpetuating these sort of like hierarchies where you ultimately teach children to either become submissive or authoritarian. You know what I mean? Because you're just surrounded by models of adults which are being authoritarian towards you, and then that's your reference points for what it means to become an adult. Either you'll become like a submissive adult or an authoritarian adult, or both, rather than just an autonomous, cooperative adult who respects equality between individuals and that kind of thing. And I think that in the world that we're living in at the moment, my opinion, sorry for going so long, everybody, that's really, really important. So I really rate this, what you're talking about. Do you know what I mean? I really rate this, what you're talking about. Our man Gav's in the house, behind the camera, doing his camera thing, does much more than that. Gav, we've been having some good chinwags. Is there anything that you'd like to ask either Karl or Brendan or both about anything that we've discussed today?
Well, I think the area of psychotropics and how they can be medically beneficial, and sort of the new approach has been taken to sort of studying them academically. I mean, if you'd like to talk a bit about that, 'cause I'm sure you'll...
Yeah, there's a lot of work recently being done. I'm sure everybody knows about the medical properties of cannabis, and I've touched upon earlier with the mushrooms and Alzheimer's and dementia. There's a lot of work by people like David Nutt. There's a charity which I've been working with and talking with called Psychedelic Society. There's also MAPS, which is the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychoactive Substances. Bit of a mouthful. So MAPS for sure. And obviously these are like leading the way to sort of new ideas around medicine, how to treat people, but they've got a lot of work to do around lifting the stigma around these substances, but also to again promote this sort of safe use, not to bring it away from the recreational use which we see, like the epidemics that we get on the streets with the new drugs like the synthetic cannabinoids or whatever they are nowadays.
Right, okay.
You know, to sort of bring more awareness and to stop it becoming that bad epidemic, and to be more of a positive spiritual development, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen quite a few not studies on people with PTSD taking either mushrooms or kind of other psychotropic drugs, and the effects on them, on their mental health, their ability to deal with the traumas that they've had. I think we talked about...
Speaking from experience, having PTSD, like psychedelics, particularly LSD, I found had quite a profound beneficial effect on my PTSD.
They can be very life-changing, but also for the better and for the worse. It all depends on
how you take them,
the respect that you have for them, having the information at hand of what they do, how they work, so very helpful, you know, and
having experts on hand to sort of guide whatever you're doing has to have some sort of direction and guide to it. You know, whether it's going to the Amazon and taking ayahuasca with some shamans, or it's going to Canada and doing a study on the effects of these drugs. I think it is important to have that relationship rather than, like you say, rather than the kind of culture of getting high off them just for the recreational kind of needs.
And it makes me think, if you don't mind, really quickly as well, like bringing it kind of full circle or back to what I was talking about before about education. Education is key. Knowledge is power. Do you know what I mean? And this is the kind of knowledge which can absolutely radically change lives for the better.
Yeah.
If understood correctly. You know what I mean? If people understand and appreciate and respect the power and the potency of some of these medicines, then it could be the difference between living a life of suffering or some sort of like excruciating agony, whether that's mental or physical, or actually having these experiences and symptoms completely alleviated.
Yeah.
One thing that concerns me is like the way that I'm like about 37 or something, so school system might have changed quite a bit, but 20 years ago when I was at school, the way that they approached drugs was drugs are bad, don't do them. Yeah. Forbidden fruit style, like, all right, so I'm none the wiser, I'm just completely ignorant then, bowling about the place thinking, well, that's interesting stuff, don't it? Like, why is it that they're not telling us anything about it? This is interesting.
You can't have it.
But then I've got no knowledge, I'm naive, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's understandable then that you find people that might engage with certain substances in problematic ways, but it doesn't mean they're inherently problematic.
No.
The opposite, in fact, it doesn't mean they're inherently not problematic, but it means that there's a lack of understanding and appreciation for the healing properties and that, that could have, as I just said, like save lives. Do you know what I mean? Like save lives. So, what's your thoughts? I mean, would we like to see the education system change in this way? I don't want to put words in people's mouths. Like, should there be other services that are available? Should we be looking at the decriminalisation of drugs? Or I don't know. I just wondered if anybody's got any strong thoughts on this.
They've time after time the prohibition on drugs has failed. This seems the more they ban substances, the quicker people are making replacement substances which are less researched, more dangerous, more powerful, and the people.
The spice epidemic.
Yeah, and people are not caring for the people using these substances. It's profit based.
Right.
You see, so it's being exploited in nefarious ways.
Yeah.
Which obviously it's leading to gangs profiting. There's exploitation within the users, and also the way it's trafficked around the world. So it's not worth the prohibition of drugs. It's just made the epidemic worse, in my personal opinion. And when it comes down to schools, I remember getting told a lot of things about these different drugs, and as I was growing up, finding out, wait, this wasn't true.
Yeah.
If that wasn't true, what else? What else isn't true? And it actually could cause more like people to become more intrigued about them, because as they realise that what they're being told is not true.
Literally, the spice epidemic is a real good example of it. So you've got marijuana. There's a bit of a crusade on the idea that it's terrible drug. So people then were looking at legal highs. Legal highs as a catch were made illegal, which probably made more people take them. And spice and mamba were kind of the two synthetic THCs that are they are plaguing most cities now.
Particularly prisons as well.
And prisons, yeah, So it's I think, like you say, prohibition is a dangerous thing. If you look again, probably referencing them a bit, but the Northern European countries, they have a very different view on. They don't have the same war on drugs. They have, when people go to raves and stuff, they have testing stations to make sure the drugs aren't going to kill them. They actually know people are going to take these things, so they're making it safer, making the use safer, having more education around it, and the fact is they have less usage. And the other thing kind of touches on is that people get into these addictive cycles not just because of the drugs themselves, but because of the lifestyles they lead and their own mental health. So I think
to escape a lot of the time.
From poverty or whatever else it is. Yeah.
And if people who are going down the route and they're trying to escape from something, it's, you know, they're running away from something. If a substance is there and it can stop that problem from reoccurring in their mind, they're going to use that. But, you know, we've got to take a more sensible approach, more adult approach, and think, right, if someone's addicted to a substance, instead of tackling that, you've got to tackle the reasons. Instead of them escaping, you want them to explore, for instance, or whatever it might be to overcome. And, you know, there's different medicines out there, not saying all medicines work for everybody, and a lot, you have to do your own personal research or speak to someone who's an expert before you make big decisions like this. And
I think this is fascinating as well. I know we've got to wrap up very shortly, but like this idea of talking about addiction and getting to the root cause, I think this is fundamentally important, something that I'm currently doing a lot of research about as well. We're dealing with my own addictions because I'm kind of recovering from a decade or thereabouts of like alcohol abuse, so I'm like really trying to get my head around that sort of stuff. And it comes back to a lot of things we've spoken about, like there's massive correlations between this idea of like if you find somebody that's trapped in addictive processes, it's often as a result of various dislocations that they've experienced in their life. It could be something to do with childhood trauma. It could be to do with the extent to which they're disconnected from nature, the extent to which they feel isolated, misunderstood by society as a whole. They could be feeling stressed out and exploited and oppressed via various different factors. It could be their home life, it could be the workplace. There's many, many different ways in which people are dislocated or disconnected from what they call like psychosocial integration is really important. This idea as human beings, we have autonomy so that we can be free to develop ourselves and explore life, but we'll also have strong, healthy social relationships too. And when we're living in a society where both of those different processes are attacked and damaged, that's where you find people engaging in ways where they're trying to adapt, but inadequately, that lead to these problematic processes of addiction. We need to get to the root causes. I really, really agree with that. And that's where we could look at this thing of like engaging with nature more, looking at how we could change schooling systems, thinking about our parenting and all of these things. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you,
Karl Smith, Brendan McDowell. I look forward to part 2.1. So because these are great conversations, we've touched the surface, and I look forward to chatting to you both more.
Awesome.
Respect. Practice probiotics, thrive together. We'll catch you next time. Hats off, Gav, as always.